His alien wife made a shocking request: help her sister experience a human male Nexus Station, hung in the black like an aging coin, its outer rings catching the faint light of a distant sun. The station's slow rotation gave the illusion of serenity, but inside, its systems whispered constant complaints. Commander Gail Harper knew those complaints well. He'd been listening to them for 6 months, crawling through overheated conduits and reprogramming stubborn processors. Today was no different. Sweat traced a line down his temple as he tightened the last bolt on an energy converter in Sector 7. The machine's blue glow pulsed to life, humming in a way that told him it was satisfied, at least for now. Gail was still wiping his hands on a rag when his communicator buzzed against his hip. "Harper, report to Docking Bay 3, came the voice of station control. "Vidian trade delegation just arrived, power coupling trouble." "On my way," he replied, scooping up his toolkit. He'd heard of the Vidians' emerald-skinned, silver-haired, newly inducted into the Galactic Alliance. Their tech was impressive, but Gail knew from experience that even the sleekest designs could choke when faced with Nexus Station's stubborn infrastructure. Docking Bay 3 smelled faintly of ozone and the sharp tang of coolant. A Vidian vessel rested in the center, its hull reflecting the station lights like polished stone. Beside the docking ramp stood a woman whose presence caught Gail mid-step. Her suit was a deep, storm-gray material that clung to her form without apology. Emerald skin gleamed faintly under the bay's lighting, and her straight silver hair cascaded over her shoulders like liquid metal. "You're the engineer?" she asked, her voice melodic with an accent that softened the edges of each word. "Commander Gail Harper," he replied, extending a hand. Her fingers were warm, textured like fine suede, and she held his hand a beat longer than custom dictated. "I am Liriana, first diplomatic envoy of Viridia," she said, studying him with violet eyes flecked in gold. Something passed between them in that glance, a faint, electric pull that Gail dismissed as static from the power lines overhead. "What's the issue?" he asked, moving toward the connection port at the ship's hull. "Our power coupling refuses to align with your grid's frequency," she explained, following him. "Our engineers tried to adjust it, but the readings remain unstable." "I can make you an adapter," he said, already scanning the interface. "Give me an hour." "I will assist," she replied simply, positioning herself beside him. As they worked, Gail noticed the precision of her movements, how her fingers rotated tools with delicate strength, how her posture shifted with fluid control. He wasn't used to this kind of quiet cooperation. Most people either hovered uselessly or got in his way. "You humans are robust," she observed after a while, breaking the comfortable silence. "That's a polite way of saying we're clumsy brutes compared to your people," he said with a half-smile. "Not at all," she countered, her lips curving just enough to reveal teeth, a touch too sharp for human comfort. "On Vidia, we value complementary attributes. There's beauty in strength. That first repair led to another, and then another. Over the next weeks, their encounters stretched beyond necessity. Technical discussions drifted into conversations about their respective worlds, trading stories of oceans, storms, and cities that glittered like constellations. Liriana's laughter was rare, but sincere, and Gail found himself seeking it without meaning to. For years he had kept to himself, content with routine and machinery, avoiding personal entanglements. But Liriana was different. She didn't push. She simply appeared, time after time, until her presence felt as natural as the hum of the station's engines. One evening, after they'd finished repairing a misaligned atmospheric seal, she surprised him. "There is a ceremony on Vidia," she said, her voice softer than usual. "A bonding ritual. It signifies partnership, loyalty, unity." Her gaze held his without flinching. "I wish to invite you." Gail didn't answer immediately. He understood enough of Vidian culture to know this was no casual invitation. It was commitment more binding than most human marriages. And yet, as he looked into her gold-flecked eyes, he felt the station's constant noise fade to silence. He nodded once. "I'll be there." In that moment, Gail Harper, disciplined engineer and reluctant traveler, stepped into something far larger than the sum of circuits and bolts, without yet knowing just how far it would take him. The hum of the stations? Night Cycle was a muted backdrop to the dim glow in Gail Harper's quarters. Beyond the viewport, a slow drift of starlight marked the endless void, but inside, the air was warm and scented faintly with Liriana's skin, a clean, metallic sweetness he'd come to recognize instantly. They lay tangled together in the wide bed, the faint silver of her hair fanned across his chest like a curtain. Gail had never imagined life with someone from another world. He'd thought the bonding ceremony might feel symbolic, something for her people's sake more than his, but in the weeks since, the reality of it had changed him. Nights like this were more than comfort. They were an anchor in the drifting rhythm of station life. Liriana shifted, propping herself on one elbow. The sharp gleam of her eyes in the half-light told him she was working up to something. "Gail," she began softly, "there is a matter of family I must ask of you." He raised an eyebrow. "Family?" "My sister Nalia has recently come of age. In Vidian culture, it is customary for a newly bonded pair to assist younger siblings in their education." Her gaze held steady, but her voice had taken on a ceremonial cadence, as if reciting a deeply ingrained truth. He frowned. "Education? Like tutoring?" Her fingers traced an idle line across his chest. "In matters of intimacy with males." Gail went still. "Wait, you're asking me to—" "It is an honored tradition," she said, calm, almost soothing. "Nalia must learn confidence, understand male nature. Who better to guide her than my bonded partner?" He sat up, running a hand through his hair. "Liriana, that's— in my culture, that's crossing a line. Marriage means exclusivity." "This— I understand your hesitation," she interrupted gently. "But in ours, it is an act of devotion to the family unit. It strengthens bonds, ensures harmony." Gail stared at the darkened ceiling, trying to steady the churn in his gut. He'd spent his life bending to the logic of machine systems with predictable rules. Culture wasn't like that. It was messy, full of contradictions, and here he was, married into one that didn't share his sense of boundaries. "Nalia arrives tomorrow with the next delegation," Liriana continued, her tone calm but edged. "With something more urgent. Please consider it." The request followed him into his dreams, a constant static under every thought the next day. At his morning shift, he crossed wires twice and earned concerned glances from the crew. "Something on your mind, Harper?" Technician Rodriguez asked while they recalibrated a power relay. "You could say that," Gail muttered. "Cultural differences with the wife," Rodriguez smirked. "Thought dating outside your hometown was complicated. You're playing in the big leagues." At precisely 1400 hours, he stood beside Liriana in Docking Bay 3. The Vidian shuttle touched down with a hiss of hydraulics, and when the doors parted, Nalia stepped into view. She was like Liriana in miniature silver hair, braided down her back, emerald skin with a softer, pearl-like sheen. Her violet eyes met his, widening just slightly before she bowed her head. "Honored brother," she said, her voice quieter, gentler than her sister's. "I am pleased to finally meet you." Gail managed a polite nod, though his throat felt dry. "Likewise." Liriana's smile was warm, satisfied. "Nalia will be staying in the diplomatic quarters adjacent to ours. She joins the delegation as a cultural attach. I look forward to learning about humans," Nalia added with a shy smile. "My sister speaks highly of your species, and of you." That night, over a shared meal in their quarters, Gail found her curious, intelligent, and quick to laugh when she misunderstood. A human idiom. For a while, the conversation stayed light station politics. Earth's oceans, Vidia's glowing forests, until Nalia's head tilted with innocent curiosity. So, humans mate exclusively with one partner? Gail nearly choked on his wine. Well, most do, yes. Fascinating, she murmured. And is it? Satisfying? Liriana's glance was sharp, a silent warning. Perhaps we should discuss other topics for now. Gail forced a smile, but beneath it, unease gnawed at him. This wasn't hypothetical anymore. The tradition was standing in his quarters, smiling, shyly over a glass of honey-sweet Vidian liqueur, and he had no idea which way he was going to jump. The next morning, Gail awoke to a low murmur coming from the adjoining quarters. Liriana's voice was calm, Nalia's softer, occasionally wavering. He couldn't make out the words, but the tone had the quiet intensity of family business. When he stepped into the living space, both sisters paused, their eyes flicking toward him, as if they'd been caught mid-strategy. "Sleep well?" Liriana asked smoothly, as though nothing were amiss. "Well enough," he lied. The truth was, his mind had spun all night around the request she'd made, and the way Nalia's curious eyes seemed to study him. He had barely finished a cup of coffee when his communicator chimed, summoning him to the engineering deck. The call wasn't from station control, it was from security. Chief Murray's clipped voice came through. "Commander Harper, we've got a heads-up from the Vidian Liaison Office. Diplomat Morton just docked. Officially, he's here early. For negotiations, off the record, he's got a history. Be alert." Gail frowned. The name was unfamiliar, but the tone in Murray's voice wasn't. It was the sound of someone who'd seen trouble before Dot, later that day. In the central concourse, Gail spotted him. Morton was tall for a Vidian, shoulders squared in a way that seemed meant to dominate space. His silver hair was cropped shorter than most of his kind, his eyes a hard, cold violet with no gold flecks to soften them. The man's gaze swept the crowd like a scanner, pausing when it found Nalia walking with Liriana. Nalia froze mid-step. The soft pearl sheen of her skin paled a shade. Liriana's posture stiffened. "Gail," she said quietly, "that's Morton, Nalia's former suitor." Gail glanced at her. "You make it sound like he didn't take no for an answer." "He didn't," Nalia murmured, her voice barely audible. "His methods were persuasive in ways our council forbids." Small, involuntary shudder ran through her. Gail's instincts sharpened. "Persuasive how?" Liriana answered for her. "Morton is skilled in mind-binding techniques, psychic influence. He can create sensations, emotions, even loyalty. For the inexperienced, the effects can last." For years, Gail's hands curled into fists at his sides. "And you think he's here for her?" "I know he is," Liriana said, her voice hard. "The council rejected his suit when they discovered his behavior. But here, with so many Vidians and humans mingling, rules blur." It was then that the tradition shifted in Gail's mind. This wasn't about him grappling with cultural discomfort anymore. This was about shielding Nalia from someone who could wrap her mind in silk threads and pull until she bent. That evening, the three of them ate in their quarters again, but the easy flow of conversation was gone. Nalia's eyes kept darting toward the door, as though she half expected Morton to walk in. Gail finally broke the silence. "If this tradition of yours can help her resist him, how does it work?" Liriana's gaze met his, steady and unflinching. "It forms neural pathways through genuine connection. Inexperience leaves gaps that can be exploited. Shared experiences. With a bonded pair, fill those gaps." He set his glass down with deliberate care. "You're telling me that what you asked me before isn't just custom, it's defense. Yes, Liriana said simply. And Morton is already here. We have very little time. Gail leaned back, exhaling slowly. He'd come to Nexus Station, expecting to wrestle with faulty converters, not alien predators. But in the mechanical logic of his mind, the problem now had an answer. Then we do it, he said. But we do it on our terms. The emergency. Shelter deep beneath Nexus Station was not a place built for comfort. Bare walls of gray composite curved inward. The hum of isolated power feeds the only sound. The isolation was exactly the point. No external sensors. No passive monitoring. No way for anyone, Morton included, to sense what happened here. Gail stood just inside the doorway, toolkit set aside, hands restless at his sides. The air was cooler here, with the faint scent of sterilizing agents. Nalia sat on the edge of the low bed, her bare feet against the metal floor, a simple white shift draped over her. Against her emerald skin, the fabric seemed almost luminous. Liriana moved between them, wrapped in a ceremonial robe of deep green and silver-threaded symbols that caught the dim light like tiny constellations. She carried herself with the same calm she had in every technical negotiation, but there was something else layered beneath ritual weight, personal resolve. This is the ritual of first knowledge, she said, her voice taking on a cadence Gail had never heard from her before. It is a gift of experience, freely given and freely received. In our culture, it is protection as much as it is connection. Nalia looked up at him, her violet eyes clearer than they'd been in days, but still holding a shadow of fear. I am grateful for your willingness, honored brother. I do not wish to be rewritten by him. Gail stepped closer, and the protective instinct that had been simmering since Morton's arrival rose in him like a tide. That won't happen, he said simply. Liriana's gaze shifted to him. Before we begin, I will perform the sisters' blessing. She placed her palms gently on either side of Nalia's face and spoke a stream of Vidian words that the translator in Gail's ear refused to interpret, marking them as sacred. She kissed her sister's forehead, then turned to Gail. And now, the bonded's acceptance, she said. You enter this ritual as my partner, extending the circle of our union to include my blood. Do you accept this responsibility? Gail met her eyes steady. I do. She leaned in, kissed him deeply, then took his hand and placed it in Nalia's. I will remain as guardian and guide. This is our way. What followed was unlike anything Gail had known. Liriana guided them, with quiet instructions, where to touch, how to breathe, how to maintain eye contact so the emotional resonance would settle deep. It wasn't about urgency. It was about presence. Every gesture was deliberate, meant to weave trust into something unshakable. Some moments were awkward, and Nalia's shy laugh would spark an answering one from him, breaking the tension before Liriana guided them back. But there were moments, too, where he forgot the strangeness of it, where the warmth of her hand in his and the steady rhythm of their breathing seemed to align in a way that felt right. Then it happened. A sensation like a current moved between them, first subtle, then undeniable, linking his thoughts to theirs. Not words, not even full emotions, but pulses of recognition, flashes of memory, fragments of feeling. Liriana's calm focus, Nalia's rising confidence, his own determination, they braided together, indistinguishable. Gail drew a slow breath. You feel that? Yes, Nalia whispered, wonder in her tone. The threads are strong. Liriana's hand brushed both their shoulders. Morton's influence cannot pass through this. What we have made is ours alone. By the time the ritual closed, Nalia's eyes were clear, her posture straighter, the tremor gone from her voice. The fog Morton had wrapped around her mind had burned away. Gail sat back, pulse steady but mind alert. He had crossed a boundary he'd once thought immovable, But standing here, with the sister's presence woven into his mind, it didn't feel like a breach, it felt like armor. And Morton had no idea what he was about to face. The reception hall of Nexus Station shimmered under the simulated starlight of its domed ceiling. Delegates from a dozen worlds moved between tables of floating trays, crystal flutes of alien liqueur in their hands. Voices rose and fell in a dozen languages, the air thick with formal courtesy and the undercurrent of politics. Gail Harper tugged at the collar of his dress uniform. The stiff fabric scratched at his neck like sandpaper, and he felt every polished brass button digging into his ribs. Liriana, resplendent in a gown of liquid silver that caught the light with every movement, leaned close enough for him to feel the warmth of her skin. "Stop fidgeting," she murmured. "You look handsome." "I feel like a stuffed penguin," he muttered. "Remind me why we're here again?" "To be seen," she said simply. "To remind the council that our union is real strong," and Nalia, standing on his other side in a white gown that framed her emerald skin, tensed suddenly. Her violet eyes flicked to the northwest corner. "He's here," she said under her breath. Gail followed her gaze. Morton stood by a cluster of station officials, taller than most in the room, his cropped silver hair gleaming under the artificial starlight. Even at a distance, there was something predatory in the way his shoulders squared, his gaze sweeping until it landed on Nalia. "Stay close," Gail said quietly. "We don't give him the chance to get you alone." They moved through the crowd together, shaking hands, exchanging formal greetings. But Gail kept Morton in his peripheral vision, noting every shift of his stance, every subtle turn of his head toward them. The first sign came like a faint pressure at the base of Gail's skull. Not pain yet, but insistent, like fingers probing for a seam in his thoughts. Across the bond, he felt Liriana's focus sharpen, Nalia's pulse quicken. "He's reaching for me," Nalia whispered. "Stay with us," Liriana instructed. "Follow the pathways we built." The pressure intensified, sliding into a low, rhythmic throb. Gail clenched his jaw, forcing his attention outward. When Morton finally approached, the noise of the hall seemed to dim. "Ah, the human Vidian." "Bond," Morton said smoothly, his eyes flicking between them. "A curiosity the council has allowed, for now." "You seem awfully invested in it for someone so dismissive," Gail replied evenly. Morton's gaze settled on Nalia. "Something about you has changed, little one. I sense interference. Growth requires proper guidance. I've submitted my request to mentor you formally." "That won't be necessary," Gail cut in, stepping forward. Morton's eyes narrowed, and the pressure in Gail's mind spiked into a sharp stab. Doubt slithered into the edges of his thoughts, images of failure, of being an outsider who could never understand Vidian ways. But the bond flared, Liriana's steady resolve and Nalia's newfound confidence weaving through him, pushing the influence back. "You'll find humans aren't so easily remade," Gail said, his voice steady despite the assault. Morton's smile thinned. "Then perhaps we should speak somewhere private." "No need," Liriana interrupted, her tone carrying just enough to draw curious glances from nearby delegates. "The council is already reviewing evidence of your unauthorized mental probing." She produced a small data crystal from her gown. "Neural scans. Proof." For the first time, Morton's composure cracked. The pressure in Gail's head vanished. But before Gail could take satisfaction in the moment, Morton turned on his heel and disappeared into the crowd. A heartbeat later, the station's klaxons blared. Emergency lighting flooded the hall in red. "Alert," the AI announced over the noise. "Critical life support failure detected. Backup systems engaged." Gail didn't need a guess. "He's trying to take the station down with him." They moved fast, weaving through the panicked crowd toward the auxiliary control sections. Nalia's mental voice was tight with urgency. "I can feel him ahead, moving toward Section 12. By the time they reached the junction, the corridors were colder, the air thinner. At the control room door, Morton was waiting on hand, holding what looked like a crude explosive. "Step away from the console, human," he said. Gail kept walking. "That's not a bomb. Power coupling dressed up to look like one. You're bluffing." The flicker in Morton's expression was all the confirmation he needed. "Now," Gail barked. "Lee-R-I-A-N-A," and Nalia lunged in perfect sync, hands clamping onto Morton's arms. The bond surged alive between all three of them and him, pulling his own psychic energy into a feedback loop. Morton screamed, knees buckling, the makeshift device clattering to the floor. Gail finished the override sequence with his free hand, and the AI's voice shifted back to calm. Life support restored, environmental controls stabilizing. Security stormed in seconds later, dragging Morton away. Gail turned to the sisters, still feeling the pulse of their connection in his bones. "He's finished," he said. "But this," he tapped his temple, "this is just getting started." 3 days later, the med bay smelled faintly of antiseptic and warmed alloy. The overhead lights bright enough to erase any hint of shadow. Gail sat on the edge of an examination platform, leads from neural scanners fixed to his temples. Beside him, Liriana reclined in a diagnostic chair, her silver hair spilling over the armrest, eyes half-lidded in calm patience. Across the room, Nalia perched upright on another bed, her posture straight, but her gaze flitting between the monitors and Gail, as if weighing the invisible current still running between them. Elder Thalen, head of the Vidian Science Council, studied the holographic display with an expression that was equal parts reverence and disbelief. "This should not be possible," he murmured. "Human neural pathways are incompatible with Vidian psychic resonance." And yet, he rotated the projection, revealing 3 intertwined energy patterns: Gail's pulsing amber, Liriana's steady silver, and Nalia's luminous violet woven into a single living braid. Dr. Cooper, the station's chief medical officer, pointed to a cluster of highlighted nodes. "His brain has developed Vidian-style resonance structures, without any genetic alteration. And look at the sisters' matching structures forming to interface with his. This is full mutual adaptation." Gail frowned. "So what does that make me?" Thalen's eyes gleamed. "Not Vidian, not hybrid. Something new human, but permanently tuned to our psychic frequency. A bridge between species." Liriana reached across and took his hand. "I told you our bond was more than ritual." "Maybe," Gail said, squeezing back, "but I didn't expect it to come with a lifetime subscription to your thoughts." That drew a rare smile from Nalia. "It makes us stronger. I can still feel the shield we built." Morton couldn't break it, even if he tried. The Council's recognition came quickly. Triadic bonds were rare in Vidian culture, but they existed in the archives, always formed during moments of great societal change. Thalen called theirs an auspicious sign for the Human-Vidian alliance. The Council invited them to be public faces of this new era, offering them a choice of postings. 6 months later, Gail stood in the observation deck of a brand new station, still smelling faintly of raw composite and sealant. Genesis Station hung in the void like a silver and green jewel, its architecture a seamless blend of human pragmatism and Vidian elegance. 20 families had already applied for residency. Researchers and diplomats queued for transport. Behind him, Liriana approached, the glow of the stars catching in her hair. Nalia followed a step behind, one hand resting protectively over the gentle curve of her abdomen. "Dr. Cooper still insists it's impossible," Nalia said softly, smiling at Gail as she joined him at the viewport. "But our child disagrees." Even now, he could feel the fourth presence in their bond, small, bright, curious already, reaching out to all 3 of them. "She'll be born here," Liriana murmured, sliding her arm around his waist. Among the stars, between two worlds. Gail looked from the stars beyond to the sisters beside him, to the life they had made together. 6 months ago, he'd been just another contract engineer, counting the days until he could leave this station. Now, he was part of something that had never existed before. A family, a future, a beginning. What started as the strangest request I've ever heard, he said quietly, turned into the best decision I've ever made. Nalia smiled, her voice rich with certainty. And it will only grow from here. Genesis stations. Outer lights flickered to full brilliance, casting their reflection across the glass. 3 figures, hands linked, a new life pulsing in their shared connection. Outside, the stars stretched endlessly, and for the first time, Gail didn't feel like he was drifting. He felt anchored in them, in what they were building, in the improbable truth that had bound them together. To new beginnings, he sighed. To family, Nalia added. To us, Liriana finished, and in the warmth of their bond, the unborn child pulsed with agreement, ready to join a universe where the impossible had already happened, and where even greater impossibilities waited just beyond the next horizon.